Hi, I'm Frank. I'm a professional chef and a culinary instructor, and I'm going to show you the essential knife skills you need in the kitchen. We will slice, we will dice, we'll chiffonade, we'll julienne, we might even cube some stuff. I'll be going over the knife skills you need to make restaurant quality dishes at home. This is Knife Skills 101. Having good knife skills is going to improve your cooking. And it's not just for presentation. You're going to waste less, your food's going to cook more evenly, and you're going to be safer in the kitchen. The only way to get better at knife skills is to practice, and today I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to turn everything on this tray into this. The chef's knife is the most used tool in a professional kitchen, and you need to know how to use it. Let's start with showing you how to properly hold a knife. The most common grip is called the handshake grip. So I'm going to shake hands with this knife. I put it in my hand, I wrap my fingers around, and I grab the knife basically on the spine. A lot of times when people are starting out in the kitchen, they do the old finger here. People put the finger here thinking that it gives them control, but eventually you're going to get really tired, and being tired always leads to injury. You look at the handshake grip, and it gives you lots of leverage, lots of control. So tuck that finger in. Regardless of what you choose, a good grip's going to give you power, control, and safety. Now you know how to hold your knife, but you have a whole other hand. The other hand is what holds the thing you're cutting. So you want to make sure that you keep those digits tucked in. We call this the claw. Fingers tucked in, thumb tucked under. The knife should always be resting on your longest knuckle. Whenever I stand in front of a cutting board, I'm making sure that my shoulders are square to the cutting board. I bend my knees slightly because you don't want to stand with a stiff back. I see a lot of people doing this, the hunch. Don't do the hunch. Good posture is really important when you're chopping and cutting. And a lot of people will go on an angle. This is how I cut, but I always tell people when they start out, try and turn just slightly so that the back of your spine is lined up with the cutting board so we have a 90-degree angle. This allows you to start making accurate cuts, right? Everything's square. One thing I want everyone to remember is that a dull knife is a dangerous knife. You should start out with sharp knives, and every few minutes, maybe 10 minutes as you're cutting, hone it over a steel. If you want to know how to sharpen knives, we did a whole video about that. Check it out. So now that you know how to hold a knife, I'm going to show you all the different cuts that you're going to use the knife for. The two most common cuts in the kitchen are the high cut, which is chopping, and the low cut, which is rocking. The high cut's usually for larger items, whereas the low cut's for smaller, finer cutting. This cut is the chop or the rough chop. It's used for when you just need a lot of vegetables in a short amount of time. I have a peeled carrot here. I almost always start by cutting the ends off. Anything that's round can be dangerous, so what I like to do, make a flat surface for that round object. Usually the smaller the cut, the shorter the cook. So if I'm going to use this for a sauce that cooks for about an hour, I'll cut it small. If I'm going to use this for a sauce that cooks for 3 or 4 hours, I cut a little bit larger. You'll notice that I go from the high cut to the low cut, high cut here, and then I turn and I go to the low cut. One thing you want to make sure is you're not feeding the material into the knife, you're actually moving the knife down the vegetable. This cut is the dice, and what we want to do is take this butternut squash, which is kind of weirdly shaped, and make it into a nice precision cut, basically a cube. Whenever I use a precision cut, the presentation is what's important. What I like to do is get my knife set in the top and kind of just tap it in, and then I push down and through with that high cut. I turn around, grip the squash really well, make an incision, give it a few taps so that my knife is secure. Down and forward in that high cut again. This part of the squash I'm going to save for a rough chop. You can almost never get a nice precision cut with this. Don't throw it away, save it. But we're going to do precision cut with the top part of the squash. You can use a peeler for this, but I find it really inefficient. So what I like to do is get it on a flat surface and use my knife to peel. So I'm using it more like a saw because it's a very hard vegetable. So now we're ready to dice. Whenever you do precision cuts, you're going to have usable trim. What I mean by that is this piece might not give me some nice dice, so I'm going to put that aside and use it for something else. Whenever I start to cut a dice, I start out with a slab. I like to line up the spine of my knife, look straight down, and cut all the way through. I find that when people hesitate halfway through, they get wonky slices. So you want to line up, cut down and through. So I'm pushing down and pushing forward. At this point, you can adjust. You can see I'm a little wonky here, so I can always adjust to get that slab really nice. If you don't have square slabs, you don't have square dice. So then what I do is I line my knife up, and I'm basically trying to get a 90-degree angle between my knife and the bottom of the slab. You're gonna have a lot of trim on these. Save it, use it for soup. Once we get to that stick, line it up, cut down and through, and you get a nice large dice. This cut is the slice, and what we're looking for is a very thin, even layer, something you might put on a hamburger or on a sandwich. Tomatoes are round, but they're easily gripped, and what I like to do with a slice is hold it nice and tight. When you cut, I'm almost doing a little bit of a slicing motion or a sawing motion, so I get a really nice, even, thin slice. Going straight up and down, I got a nice, even slice, and my knife basically whispers through that tomato. I'm gonna slice a red onion as well. Now, if you want this to be a ring or flat and round like the tomato, you cut off both ends and you can peel the skin off. What I'm gonna do is something more for like a salad. I cut it in half. Again, that high cut, I take the skin off. If I cut it with the lines of the onion, it's a julienne. But if I cut it across the lines of the onion, that's my slice. Down and through. So it's more like a sawing motion than a chopping motion. This is going to give you nice half moons instead of an irregular cut that you're going to put onto your salad or sandwich. How do you slice something that's really big and heavy? Like a watermelon. This is how I do it. I like to take both ends off. If your knife is not long enough, you can always just turn the watermelon down and through. And then we're starting with a nice flat surface again. I'm going to cut directly in half. And again, if my knife isn't long enough, I'll cut one side, give it a turn, and cut the other side. Then, once we have this, we can always turn it onto its flat side, and again, cut it so it's nice and even. Now you have a wedge, and cut your slices. This next cut is called a baton. This shape is mainly used for garnish on a plate. You might cut an apple for a salad in batons. It's a matchstick. So basically what I'm doing for the baton is I'm going to take the ends off and try and make them as square as possible. I'm going to stand my potato up and again, continue to square things off so that I start off with a nice rectangular slab. Down and through at a 90-degree angle, down and through at a 90-degree angle. And now once we have our slabs, we can cut into our batons. I start at the tip and go through and down. So that is our batons. A lot of the cuts that we do have the same technique. It's just the end shape that we're changing. The next cut we're going to do is a julienne, which is a fine matchstick. Normally with a julienne, I'm using it for a finished plated item, something that is pretty, it's a garnish. It's another precision cut that you're using so the food looks good. In order to julienne this pepper, I'm going to take off both ends of the pepper, and then I'm going to cut out the center part of the pepper. Cut it into a piece that's easily manageable. I'm going to press down on my knife lightly and kind of saw away any excess pepper. So I have a nice thin slab. My hand's a little bit in the way of the knife, but I'm not going so fast that I'm going to slip and hurt myself. Again, I'm holding my pepper with the claw and I'm just going down and through, right? So I'm not rocking, I'm pushing this through so I have nice fine matchsticks. If you just kind of push down, you're kind of crunching into it and crushing the pepper, not getting a nice even cut. So this is the bias cut. The bias cut is basically a long, shallow angle. With small things like green onions, it's usually a garnish and we want it to look really good. With larger items like a carrot, you're trying to make more surface area so that it cooks evenly. So with the bias cut on our scallions, I usually offset them and then I'm going to cut the stem end off. I'm using that same high cut that we use for precision cuts and push down and through. You can adjust the thickness by moving your claw hand in or out, but you'll notice the knife is resting on my knuckle. A good bias cut, 20 to 40 degrees. You can make them longer and flatter if you want. You can make them a little more shallow. I usually go with about 45 degrees. Make sure you have your protractor out when you do this. Chopping, we're basically rocking the knife. Here, we're sliding it through. Again, if we chop this and go straight down, we get a little more of a crushing sound. We're not getting a really nice, smooth edge on our cut. This next cut is a mince, and a mince is basically a rough chop on a very small scale. We're not really worried about getting a precise look to our product. We just want to chop a lot of it in a quick amount of time. When I start my mince, I want to take the skin off. And this isn't necessarily a cut, but you'll see a lot of chefs do this. You put your blade on top of the knife. I always face my blade away just for safety. Give it a little tap, and then the skin comes off fairly easily. And then I just go in with that low cut, or the rocking cut. Mince one way, and then I go the opposite way. The pivot point of my knife is usually the tip of the knife. I'm lifting the back and chopping down with the back of the knife. If it gets caught on the blade, wipe it off the blade, and then chop. The next cut is chiffonade, and chiffonade is mainly used for garnishes. And what that is a very thin shred or a very thin thread of herbs. The way that I do chiffonade is I pick a few leaves. We're using basil. And then what I do is stack them up nice and flat. And then we do a little bit of a roll into a nice bundle. This not only makes the process go quicker, you're getting even slices all the way through. And here, what's important is that we slice through and don't bruise the herb. So having a sharp knife is important. You're gonna do that same high cut straight through. If you just chop down on this, you're gonna get bruised and it's gonna turn black. And there is our chiffonade. This next cut is the oblique cut. It's sometimes referred to as a rondelle or a roll cut. We use the oblique cut to take something that's thick on one end and thin on the other and try and make the slices even. And the way that I start this out is I cut the tip off here. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm going to roll it towards myself so that I can see the face of my cut, go almost all the way down to the end of that cut, and roll towards me, see the face of my cut. This is kind of like a rotating bias cut. And you can see, even though I'm getting to the thicker spot on the carrot, it's basically staying the same size as the thinner pieces. And that is the oblique or the rondelle. And there you have it. That's the way to hold and handle a knife and many of the cuts that we use in professional kitchen. I have a tool that if you're really serious about getting good at this, it's a visual cut kit. You can find these online. It's a visual representation of most of the cuts. Practice as much as you can and you're gonna get better at it. This cut is called the Kendall Jenner, and here's why you should never cut like that. She starts out by taking the cucumber and putting her hand over the cucumber and trying to cut like this. Basically what she's done is make herself blind to what she's cutting, and that is super dangerous. Whenever you're cutting, you should be able to see where the knife is and what you're cutting at all times. Swing it out, use your claw, now you can cut safely.